Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years, pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world.
Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. This week is the final episode of my series on creativity in yoga teaching. And I have a friend with whom, honestly, I could have talked to you for hours about this subject, Arundhati, the host of the podcast, Let's Talk Yoga. I'm going to be honest with you, it is incredibly refreshing and just joyful to talk to somebody who is thinking about yoga teaching in the same way that I am. And I think this final conversation really brings up some topics on creativity that I haven't discussed yet over the course of this series. One of the most thoughtful topics we cover is the difference between entertaining your students and engaging them. This really needs to be said more often. Our students are here to be engaged, not entertained. So as we discussed, this desire to entertain comes from a desire, of course, to be liked. And that comes across in things like adding unnecessary novelty to your classes when teaching. There's so many gems in this episode. I'm really excited to share it with you. Now, before we begin, I would really appreciate it if you would do a couple of things for me. First is, of course, like, subscribe, or follow the podcast from wherever you're listening. I just figured out how to see the metrics of all of my followers across all platforms, and I have to say, it is really humbling to see how many of you are here. Thank you so much for joining me in these conversations. And also, if you'd like to subscribe to my newsletter, you can find that link in the show notes. I have a couple of sales for some things coming up, and they'll be announced via newsletter first. So head to the show notes and find that link. And finally, the last thing I'm going to tell you about, I'm really proud of the 2026 trend forecast report that I built for us. I defined 6 trends that we're seeing play out in the industry right now, and 3 micro trends, which are essentially just trends that I'm seeing, but I don't have a ton of data on yet, but I'm watching. So grab that link in the show notes as well, or at my website, www.workinginyoga.com/industry report. Okay, I promise I won't make you wait any longer. Here is my wonderful conversation with Arundhati Baitmangalkar. Welcome to Working in Yoga. Okay, so this is one of the best parts of the internet is that you get to make friends with people and then you get to meet them sort of over the internet in real life. So this is my friend Arundhati, the host of Let's Talk Yoga podcast. Will you tell everyone, please, who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm Arundhati and I consider myself to be a lifelong yoga nerd. I also am a yoga educator. I have a podcast called Let's Talk Yoga. I also have a yoga studio for the past 12 years called Aham Yoga up here in Redmond, Washington. I was born and raised in India. I spent most of my life there. And I'm also a Bollywood dancer, choreographer. Back in the day, I worked at the Bollywood Dance Company. And I also have a Bollywood dance studio called Bollyworks. And I spend a lot of time online in conversation with yoga teachers, creating online education for yoga teachers. And I'm a little obsessed with raising the bar for what passes off as yoga education in the modern world, how to take something this ancient, cultural, and how to make it relevant to people anywhere.
First of all, I share that obsession with you because we need to raise the bar. And one of the things that, we're on this series talking about creativity, the intersection of creativity and yoga teaching. Mm-hmm. And I felt like you have so much background in creating things and being creative as a dancer, as a trainer. So let me first just ask you, do you find this to be creative work? Is that a word you're using in your head when you're thinking about the work you're doing, or is it something else?
So, for me, creativity is a life principle. And it has
Nice.
been a life principle even before I came to teach yoga. And I've been teaching for about 23, 24 years at this point. But what I recognize now is I was always more creative. Even today, I'm a creative person who happens to have a couple of businesses. Uh, so for me, creativity was just something I tapped into at a very young age and nothing formal. There was no real outlet for my creativity growing up in a small town in India back then. But I've always been creative. So when I came into yoga, I brought that creativity with me. So for me, it's a part of who I am. It's a very natural process. I believe everybody is creative. People who say they're not creative just haven't found what they can be creative with, and everyone has a creative expression. And I think you live more satisfied, wholesome lives if you can indulge in being creative. And most people have a very out there concept of creativity, right? You have to write a play, you have to be on stage, you have to be a dancer, you have to create this art piece. No, you can be creative in the smallest things. So yes, I believe I am a creative person. I try to create something every day in some form. But I also believe everyone's creative and we need to tap into that outlet.
Okay, so one thing, I also consider myself a creative person, and I'm obsessed with learning about how other people create. Are you a person that has like a structure for your creativity every day, or are you a person who's just like it comes to you and that's what you do?
Depends on the day. Uh, mostly, mostly it comes to me.
Okay.
Okay. I've spent most of my life in my head and just constantly in imagination creation. And to me, it's not something that I sit down and force. Sometimes I do. If I have to choreograph a dance routine in the next 4 hours and teach it, then I'm forcing a little more creativity in a certain way, and that I would call very hardcore old school creativity. But it comes to me. I do need to lean on structure and systems and things like that. But most days, no, I always identify as a creative person who's working in these businesses.
Are you seeking out creative things every day? Is that like something you're looking to? Because what we output is different than what's coming into us, right? Like, are you a person who's, seeking out art and music and reading to help input, or or is it just in your head? Because sometimes I'm both.
Yes, both. I can see how you're saying both, but I have always been someone who has been interested in a lot of things, and exploring different things, learning different things, and not in a big capacity. Sometimes I'll dabble in something, and then next five
Mm.
years I will not think about it again. So I do look to make things, do things, but I'm not doing it so that I can be creative in yoga. I'm doing
Okay.
it because that's just who I am. Does that make sense?
It
It's
does.
not like, oh, I'm going to make this art piece and that'll help me do something better or more or enhance my yogas in some way. It's two separate tracks.
Okay, so do you think yoga teaching is an inherently creative job, or is it something different?
I think all jobs are inherently creative. Okay? A lot of people might disagree with that,
Right?
but I do think there is a good amount of creativity that we can use, especially when you work with people, and if you're working with the same group over and over again, which is a wonderful thing. It helps to be creative within reason.
Okay, so there's like a tension, I feel like a pushback on this idea of us being able to be creative, which I find to be, for me personally, I need that part of the job. I need to not do the same exact thing every single day. I want to
Me too.
shift and
Mhm.
change and move. And I realize some people sort of sink into the routine and the comfort of it. But there's that tension of us being able to shift around how we teach, plus make sure that we're honoring the tradition of yoga. And I feel like people get sort of stuck in that area. I want to encourage people to, I'm like, just screw up and work it out. But the reality is people don't want to just do that. How do you feel like we get over that tension? Or do we?
I think you do get over that tension. In fact, the way I look at it is, if you're a new it depends if you're a new teacher or if you've got a good amount of experience under your belt, right?
Mm.
So if you are a new teacher, I would actually say minimize trying to be creative. If you are an experienced teacher, then we can have a conversation about creativity, what that means, how to stay authentic while being creative, how do you honor the roots of yoga. But if you are a new teacher, there are more immediate things, according to me, that you have to reach for, and you build your clarity and your confidence there. And then you can slowly move to the next layer. And in that next layer, creativity is probably one of those things. So I would say, new teacher, I would bump this down in their priority list. But a more experienced teacher, there's more space because you're not trying to do the most basic things and keep track of that. You're able to do a lot of simple things in class. So I would say more for an experienced teacher. That's where creativity could come in. A new teacher, let them focus on a few other things first.
What are the other things? Tell me the other things.
Just simple things like showing up to class, all the professional things that you need to do. Show up early, set yourself up, have your sequence ready, be well prepped, have your adaptable options ready, all of that. Then teach and ground yourself in how you are teaching. Teach the sequence, teach it well. How much are you cueing? What are you communicating, right? What are the layers we're adding? What can we do in class that adds clarity and confidence for yourself and enhances the students' practice? I always tell people, take that sequence of yours and teach it for the whole week. Okay. I think sometimes there is this misconception that creativity means variety.
Yes.
And creativity is not variety. Creativity doesn't mean bringing a new thing to class every single time. For me, creativity is teaching. It's like upcycling, and you teach the same thing in different ways. You bring that same trikonasana and you offer it once the foundation has been set, because I don't think we should be changing everything every class. Once the foundation has been set, the student has a good amount of clarity in theory and practice about what that pose or that moment in class is. They feel steady and effortless, sthiram and sukham in that moment. And then you teach them different ways of engaging with the same thing. To me, that is creativity. To me, creativity in yoga classes is not bringing in different things for the sake of entertaining students. And I've always said this in our studio, that don't come to yoga for entertainment and don't come to yoga to have fun. You may be entertained along the way and you may have fun, but don't come to that. This is not a social hour. This is us engaging in a certain way. And yes, there's community and sangha and all of that, but we're not trying to be entertaining. You want to be entertaining, there are better ways to be entertained. So creativity is not variety. So I think the new teacher sometimes misunderstands, not even any teacher misunderstands, that creativity means new transitions, new sequences. I don't play music in class, but new playlists. So it is, how many ways can you approach the same thing? And that takes your student from more gross to subtle, assuming it's done in a certain way. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yes, because I teach the same way. It's like mentally, my brain is like going on a party, and I'm trying not to get really close to the camera because I want to talk more about this idea of entertaining, because we totally, as an industry, have this idea that the job of a teacher is to entertain our students. What the hell? Like, why do we think that? And how can we not do that?
I think it comes literally from the entertainment industry, where you are engaging. It's like you're not on a literal stage, but you're in control of that crowd or that audience, right? So I think you just feel like we step in wanting to be liked by everyone, and that's not humanly possible, right? And I think once we drop that expectation that everybody's gonna enjoy what we do, fall in love with what we do. We put ourselves too much in the equation and not enough yoga. You take the focus off of you and put the focus on yoga, and it makes it a little more straightforward. Okay? And yes, over time, teachers are entertaining. I like to go to a class where the teacher has a little bit of a personality, but I don't want that personality to overshadow the yoga. Because one of my teachers said this, and I've repeated it over the years. Follow the yoga, not the person. And we don't want to get lost in the personality of the teacher, and we want to stay more on the yoga side of things and not be drawn into the personality of the teacher. It works in entertainment, right? It works in other things, but yoga is not entertainment. What is it? It is a spiritual practice, and you're not going there to be entertained.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so there's like this gets really messy because I think we had a lot of people who came in the West to yoga teaching from entertainment jobs, right? So they came from, well, you did too though. You came from dance, which is an entertainment job.
Performative, yeah.
Performative, yeah. And there are some overlapping skill sets too. Like entertainers do understand audience dynamics and how to make people feel things in a way. But tell me how we can talk about the difference between those two things because it's so different to be a teacher versus an entertainer.
It's a great question. Don't even think you have to start with, don't even think you have to entertain people.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to walk in there and you have to do a few simple things. If it's an asana class, you have to ground the student, you have to uplift the student, you have to down regulate the student, right? And what is that? That is our entire premise of class. So when you walk in, you got to have a sequence that can do those things. In reality, we will stretch, we will strengthen, we will give moments of focus and balance, and essentially ground, uplift, down regulate. And if we can do these three things, the yoga feels fulfilling, right? I don't think we should be looking at entertaining. We should be looking at creating meaningful, fulfilling classes. Does that make sense? If we are going there trying to see how we can make someone laugh or feel good about themselves, our job is not to make people feel good about themselves. They come in, we offer the yoga, and if they happen to feel good or great about themselves, job is done. But we don't have to alter our approach to make someone feel good after every class. It's like at some level, we have to distinguish that going to a yoga class is not like going to a spa where someone else does the work on you and you feel great. But going to yoga class sometimes will mean confronting parts of you that you don't want to confront, right? And to create a container to hold that and to learn to, what I think yoga teachers can do better is we need to learn how to engage a student. Engage the student's body, engage the student's senses, engage the breath, engage the mind. You do these things, you are set. Okay. Well, set might be not the right word, but you are headed in the right direction. But we forget, we jump over some things, and then we're in the zone where we're trying to be liked and we want everyone to enjoy the classes. You ask my students, I don't think they'll enjoy most of my classes, but they come back because something in the yoga is working.
Okay, so that was the word that I was thinking in my head too, the difference between entertainment and engagement. Like I'm asking you to be a participant in your own experience, to engage in some way or another, which is very different from entertaining.
Yes.
And the creativity piece means that I can provide you a whole bunch of different ways to be engaged in the practice that I'm helping to facilitate for you. Is that kind of the gist of what you're saying?
Yes. And something I've done that I used to do in the past that I no longer do is I used to ask people if they liked it, like, did you like that pose? Did you like that approach? And now I no longer say that. I ask them, was it effective? Did you feel engaged with it? Was it effective? Was it engaging? Did you relate to it? And I always tell them, don't measure everything you do in yoga by I liked it, I didn't like it. That's a dead end. This is not a jacket that you're buying at a store. right? Where it's black and white. You either like it or you don't like it, you take it, you don't take it. Here, there are layers to experience. And also, the student is very colored depending on the day they've had. They may take to a sequence in a certain way, or they may not. If someone hasn't slept well and they come in for a morning class, that practice is just going to be rougher. And especially if you are beyond a certain age, that's going to be even rougher for them. So that could color the experience. So we have to learn to put what we're putting out there. And I hope we do a good job of what we put out there, and to step back and let the student have their experience without always being in it.
Yeah, I have seen this a lot online recently, this discussion about centering the teachers, mostly because I think I hurt people's feelings by accident in my comments of I've seen a lot of bigger names in the yoga space talking about this is my teacher. One comment in particular on a pose that was when students go rogue in a yoga class, they're missing the point. And it was the idea of a student coming into a class and doing something different than what the teacher had cued. And I was like, but what if they're just there to co-regulate with their classmates? Like, it doesn't have to be about you. Where did we get this idea that this is about the teacher?
I think it comes from a little bit of more traditional teaching in yoga, where
Okay.
everybody did the same thing. I've been in classes back in the day where you could not go off track.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that way yoga has evolved. I think a lot of it came from also teachers like BKS Iyengar, very strict, very do it my
Yes.
way or leave type of, and there are others. I'm saying BKS Iyengar because that's what comes to mind. And I've been in those classes. But it was even in my dance world, right? It was that or leave. So I think that was just a 2 decades old way of teaching. Okay. And a lot of teachers, right, who taught during that time, depending on where you came from in the world, you approached it a certain way. I think today the yoga industry, the teaching world has evolved where there is a little more agency. And there is a different understanding or an evolving understanding between the teacher and the student. Having said that, I think there are some class dynamics to explore. Okay, because I always believe it can't be this end or that end. You have to find some midpoint. So if the class is, say, a beginner class, right? Everybody is new. It's a beginner series. I personally wouldn't want a student who has a lot of experience coming into that class, standing on their head, doing arm balances, doing their own flow, because it is coloring the experience for everybody else. It is distracting, but at the same time, that's not the class for it. There's another established mixed levels class where you come in and there is full agency to go off track. But you do this in a beginner class, you're there in the middle of the room. It's students are going to feel things that they will not put in words.
Yeah.
So to me, there are situations where going off script is completely okay, but it depends on where are you doing this. So I don't think it is necessarily this or that. I think it is contextual. So if a student in a regular class, in an experienced class, I have students who will do 10 minutes of asana, they'll sit, they'll close their eyes, and they'll be there for 20 minutes, then they'll do restorative. The same student will be doing an active practice the next time. That container is there in those established classes, but it depends on where you're doing this and how much of. And if you want to practice on your own, sure, maybe choose a spot in the room that's not distracting. Don't stand in front of the teacher, do your own sequence where nobody else can see. It's distracting for everyone. So I think there is a little bit of understanding on the teacher side, a little bit of understanding on the student side, and you have to find a way to create spaces where this can be possible without it being distracting. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah, like it's interesting that you've said that because I'm hearing a parallel between creativity in a student and their practice and creativity in a teacher and their teaching. Because in the beginning, you do need to do a little bit more of a regimented series. You do what the teacher says, or if you're a teacher, you're starting
Lay
with
your
the basic.
foundations.
Yes, exactly, because that's how you get the skill set to be creative. And then as you get to be a more skillful teacher and a more skillful student, you have more agency to be creative.
Yes. And I would actually say something else, Rebecca, here.
Yeah.
I think a student being creative, to me, while it's completely okay, there are things I would question. Are you down regulating? In like, there are moments where a student needs to down regulate. What if you are doing something that is too stimulating? You don't understand I would argue many yoga teachers don't understand the pranic body and the pranic system, and how to ground someone, how to uplift. When does a student need grounding? When does a student need uplifting? When is a student tamasic? When is a student rajasic? How do we balance those qualities out? I would argue that the student goes by a feel good metric. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as the student is able to progress deeper into the layers of yoga. If they are just doing the same thing, hitting the same wall again and again, and there's no real progress, then I would say in that case, creativity is working against them. When you're being creative in yoga, for the teacher, it should take you deeper into the realms of teaching or making yoga available, the more subtle layers of yoga available. If you are a student being creative, it should serve the purpose it needs to serve. If you are going in a specific direction and doing a bunch of balances and things like that, it should enhance your focus and concentration. It should be able to ground you. If you are feeling very restless, what type of a practice do you choose? So I would say the student might have blind spots, and that's why the teacher's in the room. But it depends on what type of teacher is in the room. And a lot of teachers today don't know what that means, to uplift, to down regulate, to ground. If you see a restless student constantly fiddling, jumping around, what do you do? I would go back to what kind of yoga education have you had? So it just because you want the student to have freedom of expression, of course the student has freedom of expression, but we're also in a group environment, and it's a very fine line. So yes, the student can move off track as long as where they're going, there's actual value there. Instead of just moving your arms and legs and doing a bunch of poses and doing a little bit of ujjayi breathing, but are they going deeper? And this is something every teacher should ask themselves and bring light to their students as to, what are you feeling today? Why do you feel the need to go off script? Okay, then here are my suggestions. Plug these in. That at least that's my way of looking at it.
Okay, so you went right where I was going to go too. So I'm very excited because we don't train teachers how to teach that way. And so, like, when I was writing my 200-hour manual, the first thing I want them to learn are the prana values. And I want them to, every time they practice, figure out what they're feeling through the value system before they, because you come into a class and nobody's talking about that kind of experience. Most people are not talking about that kind of experience as teachers. So how do we shift our training to allow people the skill set to be able to do this? Because this is like advanced stuff for Western yoga.
You're right. You're right. I don't use the word prana in classes often. I use them with a very select set of classes who I know have built up to a point where I can talk about some of these things without them looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I don't bring the prana vayus up often, but you can direct awareness to prana without ever saying the word prana or energy or any other thing. So I think it is understanding the different types of cueing, the different qualities of breath, teaching the layers that are honestly hard to teach. Right? So remind me of your question again.
Well, I just am curious how we shift our training. Education? Yes. Okay. How do we do this and teach teachers how to do this skillfully?
I don't think you can teach teachers how to do it skillfully. I mean, that sounds wrong. The way it came out sounds wrong, but you have to learn it. You have to learn not all of yoga. You have to learn a lot of yoga first as a student.
Yeah.
You have to learn for the sake of learning We should not be learning for the sake of teaching. Don't learn something in yoga because you have to teach it. In that way, you have already done yourself a disservice. You have just gone from start to end and deleted everything else in between. So you want to learn first as a student, and you want to keep learning it as a student. Nowadays, we learn something and we take it, and the next 2 weeks we want to teach it. There is a lot of yoga happens in observation, reflection, contemplation, thinking about it, just reflection. It's something I talk a lot about. You have to reflect and absorb, and you have to create space. You can't speed learn yoga. You can learn some things about yoga really quickly, the external things, but some of the inner layers of yoga, you have to have time, observation, contemplation, which is why you don't learn for the sake of teaching it. Okay?
Yeah.
The teachers who are able to get to those layers, look at the years they have spent in study. There is no speeding through it. There's no instant gratification. So I would say it takes years to get to some of these layers, but I'm not in a rush. I always tell people these poses, this practice has no expiration date. So we don't have to rush to it. You don't have to get this today. We lay the seed, like sow the seeds today. And 2 weeks later, 2 months later, 2 years later, 2 lifetimes later, maybe it'll make sense. But practice here and now, and don't go experience hunting.
Ooh, do you feel like teachers have the pull to provide experience hunting, like novelty in their classes? In the same way that I think entertaining, I think sometimes teachers feel the pressure to provide novelty, feeling like they're in service of creativity instead of being in disservice of focus.
I do think teachers from a very sincere place try to do new things and try to add that variety. It comes from a sincere place. Okay.
Yeah.
I am not doubting that at all. But I also think that we have to have some tough conversations with ourselves. And if don't go into classes wanting to be liked, have plenty of people who you have a circle, you feel really good about your life when you walk into classes. Don't use the class to compensate. And I think that's a very important factor. And you have to find your why and what grounds you.
Yeah.
You have to find your why. Okay. Why are you showing up and teaching yoga? I love yoga doesn't cut it for me. This practice changed my life does not cut it for me. Okay. Because to me, you're taking a cultural practice. And because you love it, doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
And that takes us into appropriation territory, right? So I would always say, what is your why? Beyond I love yoga, it changed my life. That's all of us. That's anybody who has ever
Yes.
practiced any of
Yes.
yoga, right?
Yeah.
And that may be good enough to study in a yoga teacher training program, in a study program. That's good enough. But when you turn and go to the other side and you say, now I want to teach asana to others, you have to dig deeper. And what comes from that is subjective. But anytime you are in a tough spot in classes, in life, I would always go back to what is your why. You'll need it. When you do it for long as you and I have done it, you'll need to
Yeah.
tap back into your why. So if you can be really clear on what is your why, and know that teaching yoga is not easy. It's a lot of work. It's like any other job. Um,
Yeah.
and you keep going back to more than I love yoga, so everybody should love yoga. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, how do we get there? How do we find our way? Let's say you're a teacher and you're listening to this and you go, I don't have language for my why other than, oh, and you covered it so beautifully. I love yoga. It changed my life. We hear that on repeat. How do we dig a little deeper? What questions are we asking ourselves?
Oh, great question. I've been asked this question before and I don't have an answer. But
Perfect.
but some markers that I would give. Sorry, my dog is also snoring on the side here. I'm hoping the mic
I
is
can't
not
hear
picking
him.
it up. Okay. I tried putting him out of the room, but he's like, nope, I want to sit next to you. So I would look at some invisible markers Like what is truly success in yoga, right? Like what is truly success in yoga? And I don't mean as a teacher, I'm just as a human being practicing yoga. Is your clarity going up? Is your compassion going up? Is your contentment going up? Right? I call them the 3 C's: clarity, compassion, contentment. If you are able to look back and be like, hey, I am in some form a better version of myself, that's the direction you go in and dig deeper to find your why. Okay. Why do you show up? For me, one of my whys is I just want to age gracefully. It's not glamorous. I grew up looking at everyone from my mom to people in her generation not age well and struggle. And I don't want to do that. So one of my strongest whys is I want to age gracefully. I want to be independent when I'm 95 years old if I get there. So that's a simple why, right? That's a very simple why. And then there are many layers to that why. So I would ask people to look at what truly shifts or has shifted, and you dig in that direction to find your why. And it's not going to come instantly. It's not going to come right after listening to this. It's something that you have to sit with over time.
Ooh, I mean, first of all, I'm very glad that you said one of your whys is a very simple, I want to age gracefully, because I do think in my head, I was like, do I have a good enough why for, you know what I mean? Like,
it's too late now, Rebecca. It's too late.
I know. I've been this forever. Like one of my whys is like truly I feel for whatever reason I can't not do this. I have tried to quit this job so many times, or like so many times. And I just there's something inside me that internally will always pull me back to the practice and the teaching.
Fair. But I try not to tell people my why, because I don't want my why to color like you said, right? Like you were glad I said age well. That's a simple why and it's relatable. But I don't tell people my why because I don't want it to color their why. So I'm like, no, a lot of yoga is invisible. It's personal, it's private, and you got to go do the work. So you find your why. I don't even know how we got here, but you find your why.
I think this is an inherently creative process, though, this idea of figuring out why it is that you show up as a teacher. Like, this is creativity to the max that we can push ourselves as teachers.
True. And it's so much, right? Like you have to practice your presence when you're in a class. I've always said this to teachers. When you walk into that door, like, and I point to the studio door when I'm saying this, and I'm like, when you walk into that door, the rest of the world disappears. And all that exists is you and the 1 or 2 or 50 students in front of you. And nothing else exists for me personally in that moment. Okay. There's no phone, there's no dog, there's no family, there's nothing. And no matter what season of life you're going through, that doesn't come through those doors. And it becomes about the students' practice. And that's when yoga shows up. You show up, but you bring the yoga and you make that's the star of the show. And you figure out how to serve this up today in a way that is highly engaging and effective for the student in front of you. And that's a full training, and it's hard to break down.
Yeah. I think that there's something that we get as teachers too when we do that.
Absolutely.
One of my teachers, this was, she and I used to joke, her house actually burned down on a Sunday night, and Monday morning she showed up for her 9 a.m. And she said, well, what else am I going to do? Like, I needed this right now. I needed to show up. I needed to shut the door and just come in and connect with the humans. When you were talking about your why, I was thinking in my head, some of my why is that I get to do that I get to shut off the rest of life and just come in and share yoga with people.
I've done it. I know when my mom passed away, I walked into class in 2 weeks. And, there are, but nobody knew. Like, I remember a student came up to me many months later and she said, oh my God, I did not know for years all of this was going on with you. And I was like, at some level, that doesn't matter in class 2. The students practice. Yes, as community, it matters. There's a difference. There's community before and after class. During class, it's about the yoga. and not to bring in your own personal things during class. But shutting the world off is it's not as harsh as it sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we are truly saying yoga is about practicing presence and being in the moment, you practice presence in the hard moments of life.
Yeah.
Yoga is not meant to be practiced when life is going great. It's meant to be practiced across all seasons. So, yeah.
I think also one of the things that this conversation reminded me of is that as teachers, because there's this weird line that we've talked a little bit about, entertainment versus teaching. And I think sometimes we have this idea that in order to be authentic teachers, we have to bring all of our stuff to the table almost as entertainment. Like, here is all of the challenges that I'm facing and how I'm using yoga. And I want to encourage people to not do that, because your life is yours, and we can use yoga in our own practices, our own personal practices, to go through what we're going through in our lives. But when you teach, it's theirs, not ours.
So true. And what is that, Rebecca? That's a professional boundary.
Yes.
Right. And I always say this, and some teachers push back when I say this, is I'm not going to yoga class to make friends. I'm not. And I mean, there are some amazing people in the studio, and I wish they were all my friends. But I have very clear boundaries for those type of things. I also think it's probably cultural. I grew up in yoga in India, where the teacher-student relationship was more formal. I went to more traditional shalas in yoga. So it was a very formalized relationship. And we have been colonized by the British and Indian culture. So we're just more formal. Like I used to write very formal emails back in the day. Now, when I look back, I can imagine why no one replied to those very formal emails. But America is very casual, right? America is more informal. And so having those boundaries and learning what to hold back and only bringing forward what is relevant to the student, put the limelight on the student in that moment. Yeah.
I want to validate your experience, though, because that actually was written in my manual. We don't make friends. You're a teacher, and my whole staff had to sign this manual. This was in my manual. You don't find your friends in your yoga classes. That's not how this works. So I just want to validate, even though I was born and raised in the US, I think that's a really important professional boundary that you've stated.
Yeah, no, I think it is crucial, right? Because then how you show up changes.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to show up to a bunch of people that you're friends with, whether you attempt it or not, something shifts. Versus when you're going to go and work with customers, students, clients, and knowing that what you're bringing can somehow enhance or help them with something, right? And to me, that's a very clear and strong boundary, and it's needed. It's not spoken about often enough, but it's needed.
I think actually that helps us be creative as teachers too. When you have those boundaries, nothing's messy, right? You understand where your edges are and where you can go.
Beautifully said. Yes. And because then it's something else also that I like to think of is my boundaries end with class. So if you want access to me, you got to come back to class. I'm not going to chat with you on Instagram and Facebook or phone, and I'm not going to come out for a coffee. Anytime I get a social invite, I've probably declined it every single time from students. I don't go, because then we only work within the realm of the class. And I have to figure out that this is yoga, this conversation is yoga, everything's about yoga. And I tell them, for me, I have to bring everything back to the yoga in some form. So it is that boundary should extend into the digital space.
Are we the only people doing this, though? Because
that's why we don't have friends. I don't have friends, Rebecca. I don't know about you.
We're just friends with each other. Like, we might be the only people doing this.
I think, no, actually, we're not. I remember I had a conversation with Adam Hustler on my podcast, and we spoke about this. And he said something that I have kept, front of mind. It's probably because we started before the age of social media.
Ah, yes.
Okay. And some of us are just trained, raised in yoga differently. So that's definitely one component to it. I also think it depends on sometimes if you, how secure you are, how grounded you are, how you are connected to yourself or not connected to yourself. Some people end up teaching yoga for validation. And
Yes.
some people teach yoga for attention, and some people treat yoga as a dating space, you know.
Yes.
So it depends. You have to really watch where you are at.
I think you're right, though. How we control access to ourselves as teachers also, I think, can sort of bleed into our ability to be creative as teachers because there's just that it takes from you a little bit. And I want to put all my energy into being the best yoga teacher I can be. I don't want to
Mhm.
give people life advice on a Tuesday afternoon on
You
social
don't want
media.
life advice from me anyway. You know, I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah,
I always tell people, I know little yoga and I know that little yoga really well. I don't know anything else.
yeah,
That's all. I can only, you ask me something about yoga, I can engage with that. You ask me how to bake something or make something or fix something, I'm not your person. But I think
yeah.
there's something else, Rebecca, for me personally here, that I think is a difference between the East and the West. Is what I think is lacking sometimes, um, is a certain reverence for yoga, and it is
Mm.
cultural. Okay, it is something we are just born into that template, and uh, it's hard for me to explain to most people what that reverence feels like. Sometimes it's misinterpreted as blind trust, blind faith,
Yeah.
following a guru. I don't have a guru, I've never had one. Okay.
Yeah.
And it is not blind devotion. It is not. Devotion and reverence for me are two very different things. So for me, it is just the reverence for yoga dictates a lot of how I move in the yoga world.
Mm.
Um, and it is, for me, it's cultural. So it comes from that place of reverence, and also having grown up seeing, now it's different, but seeing yoga not commercialized. Now it's different. Okay.
Yes.
But seeing that, like I can remember my grandmother saying, don't do something a certain way, because it's not for show, it's not for display, and you don't tell anybody about it. This is your own personal journey. I've been in yoga shalas where your inner journey is not an Instagram post, it's for you, it's
Yeah.
non-performative. But for me, it is that it stems from reverence. A lot of my choices, a lot of my why comes from there. uh, but it's cultural. It's hard for me to explain that to someone who hasn't been in that environment.
Yeah, in the same way, I agree with you. Americans are probably the most irreverent culture on the planet. We don't have reverence for much except perhaps money. But it just is, I understand where there's sort of a difference culturally speaking, because it's then difficult. Gosh, because I'm having a moment where I'm like, God, this must be so frustrating living in the States and having to talk to people who've grown up. We were raised to be irreverent. I came through in the 80s and 90s in the US, and I mean we were, I think that culture has impacted Western yoga so dramatically, that sort of counterculture narrative that we all had at
Mm-hmm.
that time.
No, it's true. Yeah, it used to be frustrating. Uh, and then I created my own bubble, and now I exist in my own bubble. Uh, and I think the yoga world has moved from
I
where
do
it
too.
was.
Yeah.
At least after 2020, I think the yoga world has moved.
Yes.
I'm not too sure where exactly we're moving to, but it has moved, and it's gotten better. Uh, there's at least a little more of it. I think ever since the digital side of yoga has grown since the
Mhm.
pandemic,
Yeah.
I think there is more opportunity for awareness. Now, I don't know how many people are actually aware. There is opportunity for it. It is more accessible today than it was a long time ago. Um,
Ooh, so okay. Here's my final thread that I want to pull on, and I want to put a couple things together. So let's say you're a yoga teacher and you're listening to this conversation. what are we going to do to sort of honor both the creativity? And I think like step one is creating some boundaries. We talked about creating boundaries. Create those boundaries and regular routines for you. Step one, if you're brand new, please do that first. And then how do we reverently slide some creativity into our teaching?
Well, that's such a good question. How do we slide reverence into what we teach? I would say examine your own relationship and connection to yoga.
Okay.
It would start there. Okay. Because sometimes we've just not been around people who can demonstrate without words what that reverence looks like. And that reverence often shows up as holding back, not doing certain things, right? And knowing exactly what to bring in where. And that's probably experience too. But sometimes you have to turn around and say, no, I'm not going to do that because that goes against my value system in yoga, right? My worldview in yoga. So I would say the first step is to examine what your own, have you ever been around teachers who demonstrate reverence? I don't mean sit and chant. I don't mean any of that, nothing performative. You see it in just how they conduct themselves.
Yes.
And I was lucky enough to be around teachers like that who never told me ever to be a certain way. They were just like that themselves. And I chose what I wanted to be like from different teachers. So examine that and have an honest, non-judgmental conversation with yourself about that. Then the next step would be to find your way to teachers who you resonate with, who embody that, and who live that, who are not selling you a course to learn how to be reverent. Right? It's just how they operate. That's just who they are. It's second nature to them. And then learn along that path. You don't have to be somebody else. You just have to observe and see what feels relevant and authentic to you, and also know that just because nobody is there's no boundary here with appropriation, it's not a free license either. And to be able to hold ourselves accountable. Okay, I would say have that conversation with yourself, find ways, make your way to teachers who you know are being reverent in certain ways, and none of it is performative, and learn from that. Be inspired by that. Ask your questions in those spaces.
Yeah. Okay. One final pull on that, because I'm asking you because I don't have an answer. In my head, I was like, how do we know if somebody's being performative? And I just know, and I can see it. You can see it, right? But I don't have words for it. I'm just like, that guy. Do you have words for it?
It's a great question. I wondered this, and it's sometimes if you've been around long enough, and you are connected to your yoga in a certain way, you can spot the performative elements. You can, right? But somebody new and very sincere, you and me, we've hardened a little bit over the years in yoga, right? But somebody new and wonderfully curious may not see through it. And if they've just started yoga after social media came in, that's even more questionable, right? So I would just say, notice a couple of things. Notice what their yoga education is like. Who do they study with? Okay. Are there teachers in their lifetime that they've been with who've studied yoga for decades? Because there is so much juice there from the decades, right? If you say your yoga teacher is only 3 years old in experience, your yoga is still in its infant stages. So for me personally, notice how often they reference yoga tradition, yoga teachers, not even by name. They just say, my yoga teacher used to, my this thing. Just, you mentioned it in this conversation. To me, that is such an important marker of, is it about I, me, myself, or is it about yoga? Right? You will see a teacher's relationship based on what their relationship is with what's happened before they became a teacher. So for me, that's really important. The third thing is, notice if someone leans a lot on something trendy. And it could be a
Nice.
world disaster. It could be something political. It could be something religious. It could be you take something from Indian culture and now say, no, that is terrible. And you just say, you take something and you go anti it and you say, now this is my yoga. To me, that is 101 Western marketing that is being packaged and sold. And the yoga is timeless, it's unchanging. You might have certain worldviews, and but that doesn't mean yoga is that worldview. So do what you need to do your yoga. The two don't have to merge and be sold as a new offering. To me, those three things.
I mean, I know y'all couldn't see that. I was clapping at what she was saying because the marketing piece just like if we were going to pick one thing that I was going to rant on for 3 days in the yoga space,
Me too.
it would be the marketing thing. And I think part of it is because I see how people don't see it. I see how there's just some blind spot that's there. And some of those blind spots are because what's being marketed is something that you believe in or like. Like it can be a thing like, oh yes, I agree with whatever that thing might be. Yes, I love trauma informed whatever. I think we should be doing trauma informed whatever. Here's a 50-hour course for $2,000 and it just drives me nuts because I'm going to stop.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I've heard these things from students too, but I think it is such a trap that is there, right? And big labels to it, big names to it. So
Yes.
how I always say, do not look at a social proof of a teacher's popularity and think that that is credible yoga, right? And just it's such an if somebody says is if someone is a yoga teacher is stirring up anger, distrust, hate, and is publicly canceling people, right? And saying she is wrong, I am right. Uh, to me, these are exactly opposite of what a yoga teacher should be bringing out in you.
Yeah.
And I go back to what is yoga. At the end of the day, if we are saying we're all inherently peaceful, this exists within us. Our Anandamaya Kosha is right there. We just have to remove these layers and go to that. Then why are you going after teachers who just want to mirror the ugliest things? And if you hate yoga so much, why are you teaching it? Why are you in it? So your teachers, I'm not saying ignore the world. I'm not saying be passive. There is a righteous way of engaging with everything. But if your entire teachers are just taking you towards this happened, this is wrong, that happened, this is wrong. Oh, India has caste system. Now let's tear the caste system down. Oh, let's take this movement. This person was murdered. Take this movement, make that a political stance, and just sell different things and write different books. To me, we've lost the plot. And what happens after that trend is gone? What about the students? You're just going to leave them.
Yeah.
And then you'll go to the next thing and you're waiting literally like, what can I take next? I would say your connection with yoga has weakened. Go back and spend more time with it. Spend more time
Okay,
with
I already
teachers.
knew I loved you so much, but really, this last part especially, I love you so much because I think it's very important for the tradition of yoga that we understand that the sincere practice of yoga can lead us to things in our external world. Yes, you're going to fight for social justice. Yes, you're going to fight for rights
Do
for
it.
people, but
Yeah.
that's not yoga. Yoga is this other thing that can lead to all of the extra stuff that's amazing and wonderful and good that we want to be doing. That's just not your yoga practice. Your yoga practice is a spiritual practice you engage in. The inevitable result of can be these things.
What happens, I think, very sincerely, Rebecca, is when we practice yoga, our empathy goes up, our
Yes.
compassion goes up.
Yes.
And that is such a wonderful thing, right? But I think when we turn around and say, now take this compassion and do it only in this way.
Yes.
And if you don't, you're shamed and blamed and canceled and thought lesser of. And I think, no, you have to learn that once you teach your yoga, how the yoga goes and shows up in a student's practice, hands off.
Yep.
You walk away. You focus on you. You want to do social justice, go do it. You want to go plant trees, go do it. Right? You don't have to make a course about yoga and planting trees. And
Yes.
you can go and say, hey guys, I'm going. Does anybody want to come? The end.
Yeah, that's the marketing part that I think people don't see is that we see, you're right, compassion and empathy are lifted with a sincere yoga practice very often. And then sometimes that can result in, like you said, planting trees feels like a really nice neutral example there. We're going to go plant trees to make the environment better. And then it gets insidious when somebody's like, here's my course for $242 to teach you how to do yoga while planting trees. And then that's marketing, not yoga.
And even I would question the syllabus. If most of my syllabus is about the history of plants, the geography of what grows well in a certain part, right? And I'm living across the globe, and my reality, my world is very different from yours. I think America also thinks everything, what happens here is the center of the world, right?
I know.
And it's irrelevant, right? Tomorrow, what if I move into an apartment and there's no trees around me? And how do I practice the yoga?
Yeah.
So the yoga is unchanging. It should go with you wherever you go. And it's just this marketing trap of shock somebody, pick a niche, and I'm anti-niche, and just tell them you'll solve that problem for them. It's so predictable. I think because you and I are studio owners, you've been a studio owner,
Yes. Yeah.
right? When you're in those roles a little more, you zoom out and you can see a few things working in the industry versus if you are a yoga teacher who's employed by someone else,
Yes.
or you're doing this once or twice a week. It's you're not in it 24/7 like some of us are. So we kind of see the workings of the industry a little more.
Okay. So tell everybody where to find you because I know you're doing a 300 online, aren't you?
Yes,
So
most of
tell
my
everybody
days are
about that.
spent in it. So online, I can be found on the internet at ahamyoga.com, AHAMYOGA. That's my yoga studio. The online 300-hour training program is housed in there. The podcast is called Let's Talk Yoga. You should come on it sometime, but it's called Let's Talk Yoga, and that's available anywhere. On Instagram, I am Arundhati Baitmangalkar. And if you can type that out, you will find me on Instagram, and I'm there as well.
We will have all those links in the show notes too. This
Thank you.
was so good. I mean, I knew it was going to be good, but I'm just very excited. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for this conversation. It was the best. Here are our key takeaways. First, structure is almost always a part of a creative person's life. There is a part of the experience where things just may come to you, but there's also systems that need to be in place in order to help support that work. Many famous creatives have chosen to look at creativity like a 9-to-5 job, where the effort exists within a structured time frame. Now, others, of course, love it when the mood strikes at any time of day. And if you are one or the other of these, it doesn't make you more or less creative. It's just you identifying what your own process of creativity is. Next, creativity is not variety. Variety indicates entertainment versus teaching, which is sharing information and guiding students. Next, engagement versus entertainment is something that we don't talk about often enough, if ever. Our job is to engage our students on all planes, mind, body, spirit. Our job is not to entertain them in order to convince them to come see us again and again. And this goes double for the idea of adding novelty to classes just for novelty's sake. The yoga is enough, and we should seek to be so skillful in the sharing of that yoga that entertainment and novelty are not the point of the class experience. Next, my favorite point of this creativity conversation is the discussion of making sure that you have a strong foundation before you add creative elements, both as a teacher and as a student. You've got to build a solid boat before you sail out into the ocean. Now, I've seen this go awry. I think we all probably have. where a teacher or a student decided to go off book before understanding the point of the practice. Now, of course, this doesn't mean we don't accommodate for all bodies and needs. It just means that we have to have a good cornerstone of foundational principles that we can build upon and adjust as we get more skilled at both our teaching and our practice. And finally, why are you showing up to teach? Okay, this is such a good question. What is your why? I have not actually thought about it in these terms before. I show up to teach, I feel like, for so many reasons, but one of them, one that I referenced in the interview, is that I feel very called to this work. I've always felt that way. If I left, which I've tried, for the record, I would feel as if I was leaving a path that I was supposed to be on. What is your why? Okay, next week is the final episode of the year for us at Working in Yoga, and it is the discussion of one or two of the trends that were included in that trend forecast, and more importantly, how we came to these conclusions. Until then, I am so grateful that you are here, my friends. Let's clock out of work early today, go celebrate or rest, and I will catch you around the water cooler next time.